Good morning, everyone. Virgo here. It is September 3rd, 2019. We're finally into the month of September. That's Virgo's month. And I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday. I'm going to be starting a new series that I will be completing probably by the end of September. And this series has to do with specific pseudo-laws. Now, these are on subjects that the majority of my subscribers that have been with me for the full 3 years have already heard me debunk. But because we have a situation where it's ramping back up again all over the place, from the Moorish all the way to some new patriot groups that are spreading the redemption scam and some other pseudo-legal theories, that I need to make sure that this information is fresh again so that way we don't have a bunch of people falling for these scams. But before I do that, I'm going to start this series off with this video where I'm going to talk about what a pseudo-law is, and I'm going to talk about how you can go about spotting a pseudo-law that you need to double check into until you actually, or before you actually buy into it, we'll put it that way. Once again, I want to apologize. There is a fan going on in the background. Hopefully it won't interfere with the sound quality of this video too much. But if it does, for some reason, I apologize up front. It's just entirely too hot here to have nothing on. Okay, so first thing we're going to talk about is what is pseudo-law? So pseudo-law encompasses any legal theory that's developed or action that's taken that relies heavily on frivolous arguments. In trumped up legal language, we'll say that. Pseudo-law shares many traits with pseudoscience, such as the use of argument from authority, quote mining, equivocation. Like pseudoscience, most of the proponents of pseudo-law are laymen with little or no legal experience whatsoever outside of their own trials and attempts. So, and sometimes not even that in this particular circle. While an overwhelming majority of those in the legal profession will reject the arguments that are being made, there are a few cranks with law degrees and licenses that will push pseudo-law as well. Now, I haven't run across a lot of those people, but they do exist. So now we're going to talk about the signs of pseudo-law. So much like pseudoscience, one of the first hints that a legal theory is pseudo-law is when it bucks up against an established legal consensus or precedent. Meaning that the majority of lawyers or people who have lots of legal experience would not would say that's crazy, that's not accurate, and that's the majority of them saying that. So the burden of proof is on the individual that's presenting this law to you that there's no consensus with other legal experts on. However, while necessary, this is not a sufficient condition. Much of currently accepted law was once against precedent. The primary thing to look for is if the legal theory or argument has been tried before in court and whether it was rejected or not within the court system. So again, that's why we use a lot of case law on this particular channel. If an argument has been rejected by the courts, especially if it's been rejected by the courts on repeated bases, it is usually, but not all the time the case that someone attempting to push that argument is practicing pseudo-law. The majority of the time, that's going to be true. While the ultimate test of pseudo-law is how it is ultimately perceived and used in a court of law, just as with pseudoscience, the ultimate test is how it performs when predictions against empirical reality. There are many red flags that can identify pseudo-law even without a court ruling. These include, but are not limited to, over-reliance on technicalities such as spelling or grammar. So, for example, some people argue that the traditional use of all capital letters for names in court briefings mean that the documents are referencing a different entity other than the actual flesh and blood person in the case. For example, this is something that you see people like David Wynn Miller pushing. This is absolutely not the case. Capital letters do not mean that this is some form of straw man entity, as it's been called. That is absolutely 100% false. The channel of Virgo Triad channel has actually debunked this many, many times in the past. But again, this is something that's popping up. So I'm using it as an example, and I will be doing another video on this. Number 2, belief in and use of common layperson misconceptions, like a contact can only be created by a written form and signature, or you can't be convicted of murder without a body. All right, so you hear people talking about this all the time, for example, in the Moorish movement. And the truth is that it's not true. You can be convicted of something like murder or attempted manslaughter or many other crimes, without consent. That you'll hear on things like Van Balen and Degeneration Nation and Scam Stingers, where people talk about not consenting to have themselves or their vehicles searched. You don't have to consent if there's probable cause. And probable cause can simply mean a traffic stop that you are bucking up against the actual officer, and the officer feels like you may be on drugs. You're speaking nonsense. Because truthfully, when you go off telling an officer that they have a bond that you're going to lien and they don't have bonds, which is true, they don't. So then they begin to think that there's something wrong with you, especially if they're not familiar with the movements. That can give them probable cause to start searching for things like drugs. All right, number 3, quoting Supreme Court cases out of context, usually 1 or 2 sentences or sometimes even a phrase. Tax protesters are fond of quoting Supreme Court opinions, for example, and saying that the 16th Amendment conferred no new power of taxation. Then they'll quote something like Stanton versus Baltic Mining Company, or they'll quote something like Bush Bar versus Union Pacific Railroad, for example, in order to argue that income tax is illegal. However, the ruling is not saying that the 16th Amendment did not provide power to income tax, but rather that Congress already had the power. This is a classic quote mining. That's the example of quote mining. All right, next we have reference to other arguments that have been rejected as frivolous by courts. Pseudo-law concepts lock together and cross-pollinate. I've shown over and over again, 20 or 30 cases in a row of where right to travel, that specific belief, is deemed frivolous by the courts. There's even a Supreme Court law case that shows that that is not the case. However, these individuals continue to argue. Again, pseudo-law. All right, next we've got arguments that refer to the United States of America as being incorporated or a corporation of some sort, or that the federal government somehow seems to be a private enterprise or for-profit company. Absolutely 100% not true. It's already been debunked numerous times on this channel, but it will be being debunked again. Jurisdictional challenges. You see this a lot in the Moorish community also. Jurisdictional challenges that focus on claiming that the federal government has no right to try a case in states. A favorite is to claim that any court with gold fringe on the flag is a maritime court and not a real court. We're going to be doing the maritime flag scam as the first video for this very specific series, because it's one of my pet peeves. I researched this many years ago, and I actually researched it before I ever had the thought of becoming a YouTuber and debunking all of these scams. It was something that I had heard from somebody face to face, and I researched it for probably about 14 total hours for almost a solid week I was back and forth taking a look at the information with regards to this. And the upsetting part about the majority of this pseudo-legal theory is that there is not one single maritime flag for a country that has fringe on it at all. All right, arguments that the court, police, public officials, etc. have no authority over an individual unless that individual has consented to the authority. This is often phrased along with the lines of, once you accept an attorney, you're bound by contract to a court, but if you refuse an attorney, then they have no authority over you. As an additive to these arguments, some hold the belief that it's possible to unwittingly consent to authority, such as if you sign your name on a federal form or receive a federal benefit, such as receiving mail at your home's address. Now, here's the funny part about this. This is a scam artist's pseudo-legal theory, and the reason behind it is because you have to give reasons why things don't work. So let's say, for example, you want to try and tell people that the courts have no authority or jurisdiction over you regardless, as long as you don't commit certain heinous crimes. So a traffic ticket you can get out of very easily, according to these individuals. You go to court, you use something like what they claim to be subrogation, which they don't understand that at all, but we're just going to use that as an example. And you go to court and you lose. Matter of fact, you don't only lose, but you may even get held in contempt because of your arguing. They come back, they say to the scam artist, it didn't work. What you're saying is BS, and the scam artist comes back with this specific argument. You must have unwittingly consented to authority. In one way, shape, or another, you must have done that because now they have authority over you, and guess what? Now you have no options, thereby deflecting the responsibility off of the con artist and back on to the customer. All right, next, intense hatred of lawyers and the bar. Reference to the bar as being run by the Illuminati or the Masons, or calling the actual bar British accredited something or other. This is 100% a bunch of BS. Number one, the law that they refer to as claiming that supposedly this is a British accredited registry of some sort is something that they point out from 1666. The bar didn't even actually go into place until the 1940s, and as a result of that, there is no way that this actually is a possibility. They're nowhere near the same thing, if there even is a British accredited registry, because that isn't even something that I've been able to locate. Britain wasn't even considered Britain in 1666, so none of it makes any sense whatsoever. But again, another video that I will be rehashing. This is an interesting one. References to the Titles of Nobility Amendment, the so-called missing 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Similarly, some pseudo-lawyers even argue that persons who use the title of Esquire, generally practicing attorneys that will use that Esquire, are not citizens and cannot hold public office. Complete and total bullshit. But we'll be going over that. Arguments that the 14th Amendment created a new class of subject citizens, or slaves, as they like to call them, of the federal government, separate and distinct from the true citizens, capital C is what they use for citizens in that case, of the United States, lower U in that United States, and coexist with them. You'll notice on April and June's ridiculous fraudulent paperwork that on her security agreement, which she has stolen from Anna von Reitz, also a loony bird, that states that the United States is with a U that is lowercase. When you see that, it looks like a typo because, of course, it's not supposed to be like that. A proper noun is with a large U, an uppercase U. But that's where that is actually where I've seen that referenced in the past. References to the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC. How many times have I gone over the UCC? References to the UCC in cases which do not involve private commercial transactions. So, for example, citing the UCC in criminal, traffic, and tax cases. Number one, a big fat no-no, because they've cracked down on allowing people to file anything through the Uniform Commercial Code. Most of these people don't even recognize that they're saying the thing wrong. It's Uniform Commercial Code, not Universal Commercial Code, and there is no such thing as a Universal Commercial Code, by the way. It is for the purpose of private commercial transactions, such as purchasing a vehicle on finance, and when you get the loan, that vehicle becomes the collateral for the finance company. A UCC one is filed in order to make sure that that lien holder has access to the vehicle in the event that you default on the loan, and they can repossess it and resell it at that point. That's the only thing that a financing statement, UCC financing statement, is generally used for. It does not change any kind of status of any sort for a person who's putting their straw man on it or anything like that. There's no such thing as the Universal Commercial Code. Again, I will be going over this in the series. References to admiralty law or maritime law in cases which clearly do not involve any matters which occur at sea, in any kind of navigatable waters or outside of the Earth's atmosphere. The admiralty law and the maritime law mix in with that fringe on the flag thing. I'm getting ready to do a video on that. Admiralty law is not practiced on land at all, period. End of story. No, does not happen. No cases suggest this. It's total fiction. Made-up jargon from Latin that pseudo-lawyers claim derive from common law and give people special rights that others do not, such as juris spurius, when used in filing claims. You see this on the Moorish documentation every single day, or at least I do. You see this on some other groups in addition to that. And it's bull. It's complete bull, and there's nothing valid about it whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I have spoken to several people that actually use Latin on a regular basis in legal forms and laugh hysterically at, number one, the way that it is pronunciated by these groups, but not only that, the way that it's written in legal documents. I remember one person telling me that some information that had been placed on a document by Sharon Tracy Gale Bay actually would correspond to, in English, saying something about the pig's got big lips or something of that sort. So not understanding how to use Latin in a legal format is part of what you see with regards to this. Misuse of legal terminology, often because pseudo-lawyers do not have a full understanding of the concepts they are attempting to discuss. And finally, extraordinary claims such as being able to get anyone out of jail, no matter what they were picked up for, convicted of, accused of, in a matter of weeks. So those are some of the things we're going to be going over this week. Well, we're going to be going over them for the next 4 weeks. Largely, I'm going to be going over things that are a little bit different than what I've done in the past, but tie in to a lot of the debunking that I've done in the past. As I said, the very first one that I'm going to do has to do with the fringe that is yellow, that is on the United States flag. This is one that is a personal pet peeve of mine that I want out of the way. I noticed that there are a lot of new videos that are going up having to do with this claim, claiming that this flag makes things admiralty law in the courts and all of these other bunches of junk. And I want those out of the way. I want to address that so I can get those out of the way before people end up getting taken advantage of because they are being made to feel angry again as though they were lied to about this specific thing. Now, let me just say this. I know that I've mentioned this before, and I know that the people that are subscribed to me generally know this about me. When I debunk things, I'm debunking them because they are not true. I am not debunking them because I'm a huge fan of the United States or any other government out there. Are there conspiracies? Absolutely. Do we have issues with the government? Absolutely. Do we have political issues? Absolutely. And I'm pretty pissed off about some of those things also. But we don't need lies and fraud on top of those things. And if you're not fully informed of what is real and what isn't, you're never going to get anywhere when attempting to try to fight what corruption you believe is real within the government. In other words, belief and facts do not correspond all the time with everyone. And unless you've got the real facts of what reality is, you're going off on a wild goose chase. We need to fight real corruption, not bullshit. So that's where we're at with this, and that's why I'm going to be making sure in this series that all of this information is out there so that people that are interested in reality have that information and can move forward with what really needs to be changed about the U.S. government and some other countries' governments too. All right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's kind of a precursor to what's going to be going on over this month with the new series. And I'll be coming back to you with another video this afternoon. Remember that tomorrow is Snoop for Truth Day, and I hope everybody is having a great morning.